Evolution versus creationism. Have you ever thought about how we humans got on Earth in the first place? What about living organisms in general? This goes for all animals, bacteria, anything living on Earth today. Well, culture has a huge effect on this debate, and it's really been broken down onto two different sides, evolution and creationism. So, what is the culture of evolution? Evolution is defined as the process by which different kinds of living organisms developed and diversified from earlier forms during the history of the Earth. The theory of evolution purports that life on Earth evolved from one universal common ancestor about 3.8 billion years ago, and that was from an article on creationism versus evolution. The main ideas of this theory are living organisms developed from earlier forms and evolved to best suit the environments that they were living in. Like stated, this happened about 3.8 billion years ago. Charles Darwin, pictured to the left here, was one of the first to propose this type of culture, or known as the theory of evolution, and we will get into that a little further in the next slides. So what is the culture of creationism? The culture of creationism is defined as life and the universe were created by a supernatural being, aka an intelligent designer, or an omnipotent, benevolent God. That was also from an article on creationism versus evolution. So what exactly does that mean? It's focused heavily on religious beliefs. There was an overlooking power or being who created everything you see on Earth today, us humans, everything living. Examples of different religions who believe this, one big example is Christianity. A lot of this is stated in the Bible that God created the earth in 6 days, and a lot of the beliefs of creationism are focused around this. So the main idea here is to really discuss how the culture of creationism and evolution combat one another, as each of these cultures has very different core values and beliefs. And by dissecting the culture of creationism and evolution, it's an important factor in fully understanding the similarities and differences between the two, so you are able to more better actively compare them to one another. So a deeper dive into the culture of evolution. So the main basis of it, every living organism has evolved from the same ancestor billions of years ago. That means us humans, every living thing on Earth evolved from this single living organism, an ancestor billions of years ago. This started with Charles Darwin in the 18th century when he first proposed the idea of natural selection. Stated in an article by the author McKinney, he said natural selection occurs because individuals in a species vary in their traits, and some individuals have more offspring than others depending on how advantageous their particular traits are. So some individuals are better suited for their environment and have an advantage to reproduce more offspring over other individuals who do not have these advantageous traits. An example of this is the forest turned into snowy tundra and the animal fur color. So, given in that same article by McKinney, he discussed how if a forest environment was turned into a snowy tundra overnight, the black rabbits who live in that forest environment who have black fur would then be put at a disadvantage as their black fur would stick out in the white snow and they would be easily seen by predators. While on the other hand, let's say the white rabbits that are living in that forest that probably stuck out a decent amount because of their white fur on that dark background of the forest, they would now be in the advantage side of things because their white fur would blend in with the snow better. So they would have the advantage to reproduce more over the dark colored fur. And this just shows how the environment can have a big effect on survival and reproduction. So Darwin wrote the book on the origin of species in the late 18th century. And within this book, Darwin discussed many religious views and was not trying to necessarily disprove them, but rather work with them instead and try to find a middle ground. So Darwin changed the course of the world and how we see it. He was the first to kind of bring up this theory of evolution, and it caused a lot of controversy amongst religious groups because this idea of God creating the world had been around, and this was kind of going against it directly. In the book, Darwin states that I have never been an atheist in the sense of denying the existence of God. I think that generally, and more so as I grow older, but not always, that an agnostic would be the most correct description of my state of mind. That came from Dixon, 2009, who was directly quoting Darwin from his book. So Darwin does not claim that God exists or does not exist. Agnostic means that he isn't trying to disprove or prove the existence. He kind of believes that there really is no way that he can prove or disprove it, and therefore that's why he identifies as agnostic. Darwin's theory, on the other hand, was widely accepted by the scientific community. He had very solid grounds of research and had a lot of information to back up his claims and the theory of natural selection and evolution. Taking a deeper dive into the culture of creationism, so the idea of creationism came into use around the 18th to 19th century. Creationism, in its basic form and understanding, is the claims that God made all living things as they are known today between 6,000 and 10,000 years ago. That came from an article on creationism written by Ruth in 2020. This contradicts the theory of evolution because it is saying that no, we didn't come from a single form billions of years ago. We were all made, and all the living things on earth were made by God a few thousand years ago, about 10,000 to be more specific. So the largest form of creationism is through Christianity and the teachings of the Old Testament in the Bible. These teachings stated that God made the earth in 6 days, including everything on it. So there's not a whole lot of physical or testable evidence to back up this view of creationism, but it's really hard to argue against the creationism viewpoints because, like I said, it is very heavily religion focused, and how are you supposed to argue with someone's religion? Because that is something they personally believe, and it's very hard. There's not a lot of evidence to disprove that theory that God made everything thousands of years ago, or if a God even exists. But there also isn't a whole lot of evidence to back it up and help prove it. In America, about 46% of Americans believe in creationism, compared to the 35% who believe in evolution. So as you can see, in the United States, there is a heavy belief in this creationism view and religion. There are two different kinds of creationists. There's young and old earth creationists. So young earth creationists believe that according to God's 6-day schedule, earth cannot be more than 10,000 years old. And that is just strictly what they believe. The old earth creationists, they follow the belief of the true age of the earth, which is about 3.8 to 4.5 billion years old, roughly. They still believe that God created the earth and everything on it. They just acknowledge that this could have or did happen at an earlier time than the proposed thousands of years ago. Old earth creationists do have more of a middle ground with the scientific community and acknowledge that this is true and the age of the earth could be billions of years old. So the similarities and differences. So both views believe that humans are very similar to apes. Creationists acknowledge that we are very similar, but we have no relation to them at all. We share no DNA, nothing with the apes. Evolutionists, on the other hand, believe that we evolved directly from apes and that they are a very distant relative to modern day humans, but we are still related to them and evolved from apes. So comparing these two beliefs is very difficult. It is challenging to try to prove which side is right and which side is wrong, because on the evolutionist side, there is a lot of data to back it up. But on the creationist side, there isn't a whole lot of data, but it's very hard to disprove it because of that fact too. You are kind of almost forced to pick a side because of the lack of middle ground and the different beliefs of both of these cultures. So, one big main issue with the culture of evolution and creationism that has been brought up is which view should be taught in schools. So, the topic of whether evolution or creationism should be taught in schools has been debated for well over 50 years. And in a peer-reviewed article on the teaching of evolution and creationism, it stated that although the scientific community and legal decisions in U.S. courts have repeatedly favored the teaching of evolution and dismissal of creationism in scientific classrooms, over the last half century, public opinion on these topics have remained relatively stable. The public opinion, in fact, has repeatedly chose creationism over evolution. So there's two things affecting this issue, I think. One is the education and quality information that we put out there to the general public in America. I believe the education system has, in fact, failed to educate a lot of Americans and give them the proper resources to gain different types of knowledge and scientific background. And then also, the United States is a melting pot of different religions. So, religion is a very heavy factor in America, and most of our population follow a certain religious, whether it is someone being Muslim, Christian, Jewish, a lot of different religions that have a lot of conflicting viewpoints. At the end of the day, being able to actively compare these two cultures is very important. Both of the cultures are complex in their own ways and have a lot of information on both sides that it's important to kind of dig into and review and be able to see the argument from both sides of both sides of the cultures. Evolution has helped progress scientific knowledge along with medical knowledge that everybody uses in their everyday lives. And that's a very important key in evolution. And I believe it has drastically helped us in our modern day. Um, on the other hand, creationism is religious based. And how are you supposed to judge someone on their personal or religious beliefs, as that's something they believe and you can't really disprove it? But overall, there's great importance in learning and trying to understand both views and kind of make your knowledge a little more well-rounded by being able to understand both of them. These are my references, and thanks for listening.